Hello, friends. Tonight, we're not following crowned heads or armored knights into glory. We're not chasing tales of conquest or courtly romance. Instead, we're settling beside the hearth with those who kept the kingdom running with calloused hands and quiet strength. These are the stories written not in gold ink on parchment, but in soot and sweat and the gentle persistence of people who knew their worth wasn't measured in titles or bloodlines, but in how well they tended the fires that kept everyone warm. Picture, if you will, a castle at twilight. The great bells have tolled their evening song. The nobles retire to chambers filled with tapestries and cushioned chairs. But the real work of the castle, that's just beginning. Or in some cases, it never stopped at all. Tonight, you'll meet 7 souls who lived in the shadows of greatness, who made comfort possible for others while finding their own small victories in the rhythm of daily tasks. Their beds were straw, their hands were rough, but their spirits knew something about endurance that might just help you sleep tonight. So pull your blankets close, let the world outside fade to nothing, and meet the invisible architects of comfort. They'll show you that the most important work often happens when no one is watching. That dignity doesn't require an audience, and that sometimes the most profound stories are the quietest ones. The fire is crackling softly in the hearth. The castle stones are settling into their ancient rest, and somewhere in the darkness, people are beginning their gentle work of keeping the world turning. Let's meet them, shall we? The scullery maid, the keeper of clean beginnings. You're awake, not because you've had enough sleep, don't be ridiculous, but because the stone floor you've been using as a mattress has successfully negotiated the last bit of warmth from your body in what historians might generously call aggressive diplomacy. Also, someone stepped on you. That's just Tuesday when you're the lowest ranking life form in a medieval castle. Welcome to the thrilling career of a scullery maid. You are unpaid, unwashed when it matters, and largely unnoticed unless someone needs something cleaned or someone else to blame. You sleep beside the kitchen hearth because it's the only warm spot available to someone of your social standing, which is to say, roughly equivalent to the kitchen cat, except the cat gets better scraps. Your bedding is a burlap sack filled with straw that has seen better decades. It smells like burnt fat, wet wood, and what you've learned to call the essence of honest work. Your shift, that's your one piece of clothing, is made of coarse, undyed wool that doubles as both pajamas and uniform. It's been properly washed maybe twice this season, possibly once. The jury's still out. You rise before the sun, before the roosters, before God himself seems ready for the day. Why? Because everything that needs to happen before the nobles wake fire, water, bread, basic civilization falls under your remarkably broad job description. Technically, not yours alone. But the other kitchen girls have mastered the ancient art of strategic absence whenever work appears. The hearth is dead. Cold ashes mock you from the firebox like yesterday's failures. A scullery without fire is like a knight without armor, still dangerous to someone, but mostly just pathetic. You shuffle outside into the courtyard, barefoot because your shoes disintegrated last spring and were repurposed as door insulation. The flagstones are wet, jagged, and apparently designed by someone with a personal grudge against bare feet. You gather kindling with hands too numb to feel splinters, which is either a blessing or a warning that your fingers are considering a career change. Back inside, you crouch by the cold hearth and begin the daily negotiation between damp wood and your increasingly creative vocabulary. You've developed a personal relationship with this fire. Not a friendly relationship, more like the kind where you know each other's worst qualities intimately. The fire is moody, demanding, and prone to sulking. You are persistent, determined, and running out of patience. Eventually, flame catches. Victory tastes like smoke and relief. Now comes the water. The castle doesn't have plumbing. It has you. You haul wooden buckets from the well, gallons and gallons of water, heavy and sloshing, balanced on a yoke across shoulders that weren't designed for this kind of architecture. Each trip is a small adventure in not falling over, not spilling everything, and not questioning your life choices too loudly. Your arms burn with that special kind of fire that comes from carrying more than you should. Your back protests in a language that would make the castle chaplain blush. Your knees wobble like they're auditioning for a position as jelly, and you haven't even reached breakfast yet. By the time the kitchen staff starts filtering in yawning, stretching, and generally existing loudly, you're on your fourth trip to the well. No one thanks you. No one even makes eye contact. You've achieved the rare distinction of being furniture with legs, which is actually quite an accomplishment in its own way. The cook arrives like a thunderclap in a perpetually bad mood. She's already sweating, already barking orders, and armed with a wooden spoon that's been repurposed as a disciplinary device. She surveys the kitchen with the eye of a general inspecting troops she expects to disappoint her. Stew pot's still crusty, she announces to the world at large. That's your cue to start scrubbing. Again, you've developed a sophisticated relationship with every pot in this kitchen. There's the iron cauldron that holds grudges and splashes grease with the precision of a court archer. The wooden trenchers that soak up stains like they're collecting memories. And that particular copper pot that somehow always needs cleaning despite never appearing to be used for anything. You scrub with ashes, sand, and lie when someone remembers to make it. The lie burns in its own cheerful way. The ash is gritty with ambition. You've developed something between a callus and a chemical burn on your right hand. The left one's worse, but you've stopped comparing. The scullery is a room designed by someone who clearly never intended to work in it. There's no ventilation worth mentioning. The one window is permanently decorated with soot. Everything smells like meat that's been boiled too long. Plus something else you've learned not to investigate too closely. You spend most of your day hunched over basins, scraping grease that has achieved the consistency of medieval cement, and engaging in philosophical discussions with rats about who really owns this kitchen. The rats are winning the debate. Mid-morning arrives with its usual fanfare of more work. You haven't eaten, unless you count the heel of bread hidden in your apron, dry as chalk and twice as appetizing. You gnaw on it behind the doorway, trying to look invisible. You fail spectacularly. A kitchen maid spots you, reports you with the enthusiasm of someone who's found her purpose in life. And now you're promoted to latrine pot duty for the rest of the week. The promotion comes with its own special rewards. Later, you graduate to onion duty, which is a fancy way of saying cry professionally for 2 hours. You chop onions until your face becomes a waterfall. No one asks if you're okay. Everyone assumes you're just weeping from your general station in life, which isn't entirely wrong. Around noon, the nobles take their first meal of the day, because apparently sleeping until noon is exhausting work. You carry dishes with the precision of someone who knows that dropping anything will result in consequences, ranging from scolding to existential questioning. You step exactly where you've been told. Hold your breath when required, and avoid eye contact under any circumstances. Nobles don't like to be reminded that servants have eyes, faces, or independent thoughts. Your background scenery with useful hands. You hold a pitcher for what feels like 17 hours and are never asked to pour. Your arms go numb with the specific numbness of someone holding perfectly still while their muscles stage a revolt. This is normal. This is Tuesday. This is life. After the meal, you clean again. The same trenchers, now artistically decorated with gravy, bones tossed with the casual aim of people who've never cleaned anything, half-eaten pies that look like they died of disappointment, and something that may have once been fish, but has since evolved into a philosophical question. You scrape it all into the slop bucket, trying not to think too hard about what happens to slop buckets. You're not allowed to keep scraps officially, but you might sneak a crust. Just once, just the edge, just enough to keep your knees from giving up entirely. Afternoon blurs into evening like watercolors in rain. More water, more peeling of roots that seem to multiply when you're not looking. More mopping of floors that apparently attract dirt through some form of medieval magnetism. More sweeping of halls where people track in mud with the dedication of artists. You get blamed for the dog vomiting in the solar. Even though you've never seen the solar and aren't entirely sure what a solar is, geography is irrelevant when someone needs to assign blame. As the sun sets, dinner preparation begins with all the chaos of a small, very angry war. The hearth blazes like it has personal ambitions. Smoke fills the rafters with enthusiasm. Someone drops a pot. The cook achieves new heights of creative vocabulary. A fire nearly starts. You slap it out with your apron and keep moving because stopping means thinking, and thinking means questions you're not equipped to answer. You're allowed to eat again, this time from a communal bowl shared between 5 girls. The stew is mostly optimistic: a floating root, a grain of barley, and a chunk of something that might be meat if you squint and believe hard enough. You eat it anyway. It's warm. It's food. Those are the only qualifications that matter. Finally, dinner is served to the nobles with the ceremony usually reserved for religious events. You stand nearby, a carefully invisible presence in someone else's theater. Your feet are soaked. Your back has locked into a position that might charitably be called functional. And you haven't spoken in hours except to say, yes, cook. Sorry, cook. And it won't happen again, cook. Whether or not you know what it is remains refreshingly irrelevant. Night falls with the gentle finality of a door closing. More dishes, more scrubbing, more bones that have fossilized into the pans with the determination of archaeological specimens. Your hands shake now, not from cold, but from exhaustion that has moved beyond the physical and into the realm of existential experience. You're dismissed with a grunt that might charitably be interpreted as gratitude. You crawl back to your sack near the hearth, where the fire has dimmed to glowing embers that pulse like a sleepy heartbeat. You press close to the warm stones, your tunic still damp, smelling like smoke, onions, and the particular fatigue that comes from a day well worked. Someone's already asleep beside you, snoring softly. Someone else is crying quietly into a straw pillow. You don't ask who. In a world where privacy is measured in inches, some things remain sacred. You lie there for a moment, not quite asleep, not entirely awake, thinking about the strange dignity that comes from keeping the world clean. You didn't choose this life. No one chooses to be a scullery maid. But you've learned that there's a particular pride in making order from chaos, in turning grimy pots into shining vessels, in knowing that tomorrow's bread will rise in ovens you help prepare. You close your eyes and listen to the castle settling into night. The stones creak gently as they cool. Somewhere, a cat purrs with the satisfaction of someone whose job is simply to exist beautifully. The fire whispers secrets to the darkness. Tomorrow will be the same. Water, fire, scrubbing, and the endless dance of keeping civilization running one clean pot at a time. But tonight, Victim, you've earned your rest in the way that only comes from honest work honestly done. Sleep comes easily when your conscience is as clean as your pots. And yours, finally, are spotless. As the scullery maid's breathing evens into the gentle rhythm of earned sleep, her calloused hands finally still beside the dying embers. Elsewhere in the castle, a different kind of rhythm begins. Not the splash of water or the scrape of pot against stone, but something steadier, more hypnotic, the patient turn of meat over flame. The quiet dance of a boy who has learned that some jobs require not strength, but the rarest skill of all, perfect, endless consistency. The fire never sleeps, and neither, it seems, does he. Tale to the Spit Boy. You are the Spit Boy. Whether this calls for congratulations or condolences depends entirely on how much you enjoy rotating slowly in front of an open flame while contemplating the philosophical implications of perfectly cooked meat. You're somewhere between 8 and 12 years old, small enough to crouch comfortably under the great kitchen hearth, old enough to understand that crying every time you burn yourself is considered unprofessional. You arrived here through one of the traditional routes: orphaned, sold, or your parents possessed such powers of persuasion that they convinced you this was an opportunity rather than what it actually is. Your job description is elegantly simple: sit on a stool, if you're lucky enough to have claimed one, beside the great kitchen hearth, and turn the spit all day. Slowly, clockwise, mostly, until someone tells you otherwise, which they will, frequently, and with impressive creativity regarding your apparent deficiencies in the ancient art of meat rotation. Sometimes you are told to stop. Sometimes you're informed that you're turning too fast, too slow, or without sufficient noble dignity. Once, someone accused you of impertinence because you blinked too often. You've since learned to ration your blinks like a miser hoarding coins. It's hot. Not ordinary hot that would be manageable. This is hot in a way that feels supernatural, like living inside a loaf of bread that's decided to bake itself with you as filling. Your cheeks maintain a permanent flush that makes you look either healthy or feverish, depending on the lighting. Your hair stays perpetually damp with honest sweat. Your tunic, singed at the hem from proximity to greatness, has absorbed the essence of every type of meat that's ever graced this kitchen. You used to enjoy the smell of roasting duck. Now it triggers what you've learned to recognize as an occupational headache. Burns are as inevitable as sunrise, and about as welcome. Constant small blisters decorate your hands like painful jewelry. The kitchen staff has developed a philosophical approach to your injuries. Get better at dodging. If you blister your palm, wrap it in whatever cloth you can find. If your eyebrows singe off, grow new ones. If you faint from the heat, try to land somewhere that won't spill the sauce. You don't get breaks because meat doesn't believe in breaks. The fire doesn't care if you're sweating so profusely that salt stings your eyes. The nobles expect their roast goose to spin at the precise angle and pace that their grandfather's geese spun, because tradition is apparently more important than your comfort. Sanity, or circulation. On special feast days, the spit grows longer and more ambitious. Bigger birds, whole pigs. Once an entire deer that required two of you to turn. Your partner on that memorable occasion had a lazy eye and a mean streak that expressed itself through randomly releasing his grip on the crank just to watch you panic. You haven't seen him lately. Rumor suggests he was reassigned to the kennels. You hope the dogs are teaching him about teamwork. You sit for hours in the same position, legs folded like a meditation monk who's chosen the wrong monastery. Your knees achieve a numbness that transcends physical sensation and enters the realm of philosophical question. Once, your foot fell asleep so thoroughly you thought you'd been cursed. The steward called you dramatic and demonstrated his point by throwing a turnip at your head with remarkable accuracy. The kitchen around you operates in controlled chaos. Shouting, boiling, clanging. People colliding with trays of delicate things while juggling jugs of wine that cost more than your annual existence. You are the eye of this storm, the one constant, reliable element in a world of culinary catastrophe. Nobody thanks you, because thanking the spit boy would be like thanking the sun for rising. But if that roast emerges uneven, if one side chars while the other remains disappointingly pink, someone will definitely remember that a boy was responsible for the turning. Memory is remarkably selective when blame needs distributing. When the meat finally achieves whatever mysterious standard of doneness the cook demands, and this standard seems to change based on her mood, the weather, and the phase of the moon, you help extract it from the spit. Carefully, the fat sizzles with enthusiasm. Grease drips with the precision of tiny burning arrows. Flinching earns scolding. Hesitation earns worse. Then it's immediately on to the next roast, or the stew that needs stirring, or the cauldron that bubbles with what smells like fermented vegetables and lost hope. Time becomes irrelevant when your entire universe consists of firelight and the endless rotation of your small, determined hands. Your life is measured not in hours but in degrees of turn, not in days but in the number of roasts that have passed through your careful attention. Sometimes, if fortune smiles and no one is watching, someone tosses you a bone, literally. Not a metaphor for advancement, but an actual bone with just enough meat clinging to it that you can pretend you've had lunch. You eat it in whatever corner offers the most privacy, hunched like a small, grateful animal. Then return immediately to your rotation because the meat waits for no one. By late afternoon, then, the fire has painted your cheeks red and transformed your lips into something resembling dried leather. Your hands are decorated with soot in patterns that would be artistic if they weren't so thoroughly practical. You've inhaled enough smoke to cough like someone 4 times your age, a sound that adds a percussive element to the kitchen's symphony. Above you, plates clatter and nobles laugh in the great hall, a room you'll never see, filled with clean chairs and white bread and people who exist in a world where meat appears perfectly cooked without anyone having to think about how it got that way. Eventually, the feasting ends, which doesn't mean you're finished. It means you now get to help transport trays of half-eaten delicacies back to the kitchen, where you'll scrape bones into slop buckets and drag the roasting spit to the scullery for its daily resurrection. The spit is heavier than it looks, and you've developed muscles in places you didn't know could have muscles. Your shoulders ache with the specific pain of someone who's been turning the same motion for months. You pretend the blister under your palm isn't leaking something warm and concerning. Late in the evening, when the last noble has been fed and the kitchen begins its nightly transformation from chaos to merely disorganized, you're finally granted a bowl of pottage. It's thin, basically boiled grain with a few turnips that have given up on life, but it's warm and it's yours. You eat in whatever corner the other workers aren't using, not because you're antisocial, but because everyone is too exhausted for conversation. Speech requires energy that you've all spent on more essential activities, like staying upright and maintaining basic bodily functions. You clean your tools with the care of someone who knows that tomorrow depends on today's preparation. The dull knives, the turning mechanism, the hooks that hold everything together all must be spotless before the steward makes his evening inspection. If he discovers even a smear of fat, you'll be cleaning it off with your own spit if you're fortunate, or spending tomorrow on privy duty if you're not. Night settles over the kitchen like smoke dissipating. The last pots find their places. The cook finally achieves a volume that might charitably be called inside voice. You sit near the dying fire, too sore to lie down properly, too overstimulated to sleep immediately. A rat scurries past your feet. You don't flinch anymore. You've achieved a peaceful coexistence with the castle's rodent population, based on mutual respect and shared exhaustion. You think sometimes about your life before the castle. Maybe you were a shepherd's son, watching clouds instead of meat. Maybe your parents ran a mill, and you fell asleep to the sound of water turning wheels instead of your own hands turning spits. Maybe they remember you. Maybe they've forgotten. Maybe they were just hungry enough that one less mouth to feed seemed like salvation rather than loss. There's no clear path forward from Spitboy. You might graduate to assistant cook by 20 if your back doesn't give out and your lungs don't revolt from smoke inhalation. If you're very lucky and very careful, you might learn enough about the kitchen to become indispensable in some slightly more comfortable way. But tonight, as you settle into your nest of rags near the banked fire, listening to the castle's stones cool and crack in their nightly symphony, you're not thinking about advancement or escape. You're thinking about the perfect rotation you achieved on this afternoon's duck, how the skin crackled just right, how even the cook nodded approvingly. That duck fed 20 people. Your hands made that possible. Your patience, your consistency, your willingness to sit in the heat and turn again created something that brought satisfaction to others. It's not glory, it's not recognition, but it's real work that produces real results. And there's a quiet pride in that, which doesn't require an audience to validate it. You close your eyes and listen to the embers settling into ash, the distant sound of your own breathing finally slowing to match the gentle rhythm of a castle at rest. Tomorrow there will be more meat, more turning, more heat and smoke, and the endless dance of consistency. But tonight you've earned your place by the fire. You've kept the ancient bargain between flame and food, between patience and sustenance. Your small hands have upheld their end of civilization's longest contract. Sleep comes easily when you're too tired to fight it, and even more easily when you know you've done your job well. The fire never really dies, it just waits, glowing quietly, for tomorrow's meat and tomorrow's boy to begin the turning all over again. Some rhythms are older than castles, older than kingdoms. Tonight, you're part of one of them. As the Spit Boy settles into sleep beside the glowing embers, his small hands finally still after their day of endless turning, the castle's rhythm shifts once again, beyond the kitchen walls, in a world that smells of hay and leather instead of smoke and grease. Another kind of partnership unfolds in the darkness. Here, Papi, trust isn't built with words, but with gentle hands and patient understanding. Here, in the warm breathing spaces between stone walls, someone tends to creatures whose loyalty is earned one careful moment at a time. The horses are stirring. They know his footsteps before he even reaches the stable door. The stable boy. You start your day in a barn that never quite sleeps. The horses stir before sunrise, snorting clouds of steam into the frozen air. Hooves shuffling softly in stalls layered with fresh straw and the occasional philosophical rat. You are the stable boy, which means you shovel, you brush, you haul, and you get kicked with surprising frequency. But mostly you serve creatures that outrank you in both grace and daily nutrition. You sleep in the loft above the main stable, if you can dignify it with the term sleep. The floorboards are thin enough that you participate in every midnight conversation the horses have with each other, every tail swish, every contemplative snort. You know Thunder's tendency to pace when storms are coming, Buttercup's habit of reorganizing her straw into increasingly elaborate patterns, and Midnight's philosophical approach to hay distribution. Your hands are already cracked with cold before dawn properly arrives. You pull on boots that have achieved a comfortable relationship with your feet through mutual compromise, and the same stiff tunic that smells faintly of horse, leather, and what you've learned to call honest work with large animals. The cold hits you like a personal insult from winter itself as you climb down the ladder. But there's something peaceful about the pre-dawn stable, the gentle breathing of sleeping horses, the creak of well-worn wood, the sense that you're the only human awake in a world that belongs, temporarily, entirely to you and your four-legged colleagues. You start with mucking, because someone has to, and that someone is always you. Shovel, pitch, shovel again. It's not glamorous work, but there's a rhythm to it that becomes almost meditative once you stop fighting it. Each stall tells the story of yesterday, who ate well, who was restless, who managed to kick their water bucket into an impressive modern art installation. You work efficiently but never hastily. Quick movements spook horses, and spooked horses are significantly worse than angry nobles. They bite with more honesty, rear with genuine conviction, and their kicks can break bones rather than just spirits. You've already sacrificed 2 fingers to the learning process and collected a hoof-shaped bruise on your ribs that taught you valuable lessons about spatial awareness. But despite the occupational hazards, you love them, these large, complicated creatures who don't lie, don't scheme, and don't pretend to be anything other than exactly what they are. They're honest in a way that most humans haven't figured out yet. The stable smells like hay and manure and leather and horse, a combination that should be unpleasant, but has somehow become the scent of home. You've stopped smelling it the way regular people do. Now you can distinguish between the healthy earthiness of well-kept animals and the sharper notes that signal illness or distress. After mucking, you fetch feed from the storage room, heavy sacks of oats and bales of hay stacked like golden building blocks. You lower them carefully from the loft, having learned through painful experience that rushing this process leads to twisted backs and creative vocabulary sessions that would shock the castle chaplain. Feeding time reveals each horse's personality with remarkable clarity. Some are eager and greedy, attacking their oats like they haven't eaten in weeks. Others are discriminating, examining each mouthful with the critical eye of a wine taster. Buttercup always saves the best bits for last, while Thunder believes in finishing everything immediately in case the world ends before breakfast. You've learned to read their moods through a dozen small signs: the angle of an ear, the set of a shoulder, the particular way Willow tosses her head when she's feeling sociable versus when she'd prefer to be left alone with her thoughts. It's a language more honest than most human conversation. Mid-morning brings grooming, which is where the real relationship building happens. You brush and curry and clean hooves with the patience of someone who understands that trust is earned one gentle stroke at a time. You untangle manes with careful fingers, pick burrs from tails, and whisper the kind of nonsense that horses seem to appreciate more than most human discourse. Each horse has preferences. Thunder likes firm brushing and doesn't mind having his hooves handled. Buttercup prefers gentle, circular motions and will nip if you're too rough with her fetlocks. Midnight tolerates grooming with the air of someone submitting to a necessary but tedious social obligation. You've developed a collection of scars that tell the story of your education in horse psychology. The crescent-shaped mark on your forearm from the day you misread Thunder's warning signs. The parallel scratches on your wrist from when Willow decided your grooming technique needed immediate correction. Each scar represents a lesson learned, a boundary established, a relationship refined. If the Lord decides to ride, and he always decides at the most inconvenient possible moment, everything changes. The stable transforms from peaceful barn to military staging ground. You saddle his preferred gelding, the one with opinions about everyone and everything, checking each strap with the paranoia of someone who knows that a loose girth means a dismounted lord. And a dismounted lord means a very unhappy stable boy. You've learned to read the signs of an impending ride, a certain restlessness in the Lord's step, the way he glances toward the stable, the subtle increase in his complaints about everything unrelated to horses. When the moment comes, you saddle up with practiced efficiency while trying not to look like you're hurrying, because lords dislike the implication that their spontaneous decisions might inconvenience anyone. The rest of your day flows in comfortable patterns established by seasons and necessity. Fresh water for troughs that always seem thirstier than mathematically possible. Checking and rechecking that gates are properly latched, because an escaped horse means a very long day of explaining things to very angry people. Sweeping the yard clear of debris that horses seem to generate through some form of agricultural magic. You've developed muscles in places you didn't know could have muscles, and calluses that serve as personal armor against rope burn and wood splinters. Your back aches with the specific pain of someone who spends their day bending, lifting, and carrying things that weigh more than seems reasonable. But there are moments, quiet moments between the work when one of the horses nuzzles your shoulder with velvet softness, or when Thunder allows you to rest your hand on his neck while he dozes in the afternoon sun, or when Buttercup shares the apple you smuggled from the kitchen stores. These moments remind you why you stay, why you chose this life of early mornings and aching joints. Winter brings its own challenges. Your fingers go numb even inside gloves, and the water troughs develop a skin of ice that you crack each morning with increasingly creative implements. The horses grow thick winter coats that make them look like large, dignified sheep, and their breath steams in the cold air like dragon smoke. You break ice with determination born of necessity, your hammering echoing in the still morning air. Sometimes you wonder if anyone in the warm castle realizes that the stable has no insulation, no fire, no comfort beyond what you and the horses provide for each other through shared body heat and mutual respect. Summer presents different trials. You sweat through your tunic, your shirt, and what you suspect might be your soul. The flies arrive in biblical proportions, forming clouds of persistent annoyance that seem personally offended by the existence of both horses and humans. You develop a philosophical relationship with sweat, accepting it as the price of keeping large animals comfortable in small spaces. Evening brings a different kind of peace. You make your final rounds as the sun sets behind the castle walls, checking each horse one last time. You refill water buckets, ensure that hay nets are properly secured, and conduct the small rituals of care that make the difference between horses that trust you and horses that merely tolerate you. You've learned to love these evening moments, the warm weight of a horse's head over your shoulder, the gentle nicker that serves as both greeting and good night, the way midnight always insists on one final pat before settling in for the night. These aren't just animals under your care, they're colleagues, partners in the quiet work of making transportation possible for people who rarely think about what happens between deciding to travel and actually moving. When your work is finally finished, You climb back to your loft with legs that feel like they've personally carried every horse in the stable. Your nest of blankets and straw awaits, hardly luxurious but earning the comfort that comes from honest exhaustion. You lie back and listen to the symphony of the settling stable, the gentle shift of hooves and straw, the occasional whicker of a horse sharing some midnight thought with a neighbor, the creak of wood adjusting to the cooling night air. It's a peaceful sound, the sound of creatures well cared for and content. Sometimes the castle guards make jokes as they pass. Don't let them step on you, they call, laughing like they've invented humor. You smile politely because maintaining good relationships with the guards means they'll help if a horse ever gets loose. But you know something they don't. These horses are more careful about where they step than most humans. You think sometimes about the stories they tell of knights in glory, of tournaments where horses carry their riders to victory. Those stories always forget to mention the boy who saddled the horse, who spent months building the trust that makes such partnerships possible, who whispered encouragement into a nervous ear before battle. That's fine. You're not here to be remembered in songs. You're here to work, to care, to maintain the quiet partnership between human and horse that makes the rest of civilization possible. You're here because these creatures, honest and straightforward in ways that humans rarely manage, have taught you something about loyalty that doesn't require an audience. The wind rattles the stable shutters as you settle deeper into your blankets. Below you, the horses shift and settle, their breathing evening into the rhythm of deep, peaceful sleep. Somewhere in the distance, the castle bells toll the hour, but time feels different here, measured not in bells but in breaths, not in schedules but in the patient rhythm of care given and received. You close your eyes and let the sounds of the stable wash over you, the gentle percussion of contentment, the soft symphony of creatures who trust you enough to sleep peacefully under your watch. Tomorrow will bring more mucking, more feeding, more of the endless cycle of care that keeps these magnificent animals healthy and ready for whatever service the castle requires. But tonight you rest easy knowing that your charges are safe, warm, and well tended. In a world that often measures worth by titles and gold, you've found something more valuable, the quiet satisfaction of being trusted by creatures who ask only for kindness in return for their strength. Sleep comes easily when you're surrounded by the gentle breathing of animals who consider you part of their herd. And perhaps you are. As the stable boy drifts into sleep, surrounded by the gentle breathing of his four-legged charges, another nocturnal workforce begins its ancient patrol. These employees require no wages, no supervision, and no encouragement, only the occasional diplomatic intervention when their enthusiasm for pest control conflicts with kitchen politics. In the shadowy spaces between walls, along windowsills, and through corridors where human footsteps rarely venture, 17 pairs of eyes reflect the moonlight streaming through arrow slits. They are the castle's most effective department, and someone has to manage them. The night shift purrs its way to duty. The castle cat coordinator. You are responsible for 17 cats and one particularly judgmental raven. Your official title, should anyone ask, is Pest Management Coordinator. But what you actually do is conduct diplomatic negotiations between the castle's feline workforce and everyone else who has opinions about where cats should and shouldn't be. The cats, naturally, have their own ideas about jurisdiction. You wake not to bells or roosters, but to the gentle pressure of Duchess stepping precisely on your bladder. She's a gray tabby with white gloves and the organizational skills of a military strategist. This is her way of informing you that the morning briefing is about to begin, whether you're ready or not. Your quarters are in a corner room of the castle that everyone else forgot existed, which suits you perfectly. It's equipped with 17 different sleeping surfaces that the cats have claimed through a complex system of negotiations you're still trying to understand. Your own bed is whatever space remains after democratic feline distribution, which varies depending on the weather, territorial disputes, and what you've begun to recognize as seasonal personality adjustments. The raven, who goes by Sir Edgar because he insists on dignity, perches on a beam above your head and provides morning commentary that ranges from philosophical observations to what you suspect are rather pointed criticisms of your housekeeping. You dress quickly in practical clothes designed for crawling through spaces that humans weren't meant to access. Your tunic has been reinforced at the elbows and knees. Your boots are soft-soled for stealth. And every pocket contains either cat treats or small tools for reaching places where cats have decided to conduct their business. Your first responsibility is the morning census. Not because you don't trust the cats to stay alive, they're remarkably competent, but because knowing where everyone is helps prevent diplomatic incidents between cats and humans who haven't yet accepted that they're sharing the castle rather than owning it. You begin with a roll call that would sound absurd to anyone else, but makes perfect sense when you're managing a workforce that considers "come here" more of a suggestion than a command. Duchess, present, sitting regally on the windowsill, tail arranged with mathematical precision. Professor Whiskers, investigating something fascinating behind the grain stores, probably something that needs investigating. Lady Midnight absent, which means she's either hunting in the wine cellar or has discovered a new napping location that will become today's crisis when someone finds her and assumes she's stuck. Button, asleep in a shaft of sunlight, demonstrating the advanced relaxation techniques that make cats such excellent stress management consultants. Each cat has a personality, a preferred territory, and a specialty. Duchess handles diplomatic relations with the kitchen staff through a combination of strategic purring and well-timed appearances during meal preparation. Professor Whiskers, a large orange tom with scholarly inclinations, specializes in the wine cellar where his patience and night vision make him the perfect guardian against rodents who might otherwise develop expensive tastes. Lady Midnight, sleek in black and utterly convinced of her own superiority, patrols the upper floors where nobles live. Her technique involves being so obviously perfect that humans feel honored by her presence, which makes her remarkably effective at preventing mouse problems in chambers where discovering vermin would cause social catastrophes. Your job is to ensure that each cat's natural hunting instincts align with the castle's practical needs while minimizing conflicts with humans who haven't yet grasped that cats are colleagues rather than pets. This requires a sophisticated understanding of both feline psychology and human politics. When the cook complains that cats are stealing from the larder, you explain that they are actually conducting quality control inspections to ensure that stored food hasn't attracted unauthorized rodents. When nobles express concern about cats in their chambers, you emphasize the exclusive nature of feline security services. Mid-morning brings the daily territorial negotiations. Cats operate on a complex system of time-sharing that would impress the most organized human administrator. The sunny windowsill in the Great Hall belongs to Duchess from dawn until noon, then transfers to Button for the afternoon shift. The warm spot near the kitchen hearth rotates among 3 different cats, according to a schedule they've worked out through methods you don't pretend to understand. Your role is to mediate when these arrangements break down, usually due to seasonal adjustments, changes in human routine, or what you've learned to recognize as personality conflicts requiring professional intervention. Today's crisis involves Sir Pudding, a remarkably round tabby who has decided that the chapel is the perfect place for his afternoon constitutional. The chaplain disagrees, strongly. You spend an hour diplomatically relocating Sir Pudding to the herb garden, where his enthusiasm for digging serves the dual purpose of soil aeration and personal satisfaction. The Raven, Sir Edgar, provides running commentary on your mediation techniques with what you're fairly certain is amusement. Ravens, you've discovered, have a highly developed sense of irony. Your afternoon is devoted to strategic placement. The miller's daughter has complained about mice in the flower stores, which means deploying Professor Whiskers and his apprentice, a young tortoiseshell named Scholar, who takes her education very seriously. You escort them to the scene, provide situational briefing mice, probable entry points, no disturbing the flower unless absolutely necessary, and leave them to their professional duties. The wine cellar requires Lady Midnight's attention, not because there are mice, but because preventing them requires someone with her particular combination of elegance and ruthless efficiency. Nobles who glimpse her patrolling among the wine casks comment on the charming ambiance, without realizing they're witnessing pest prevention at its most sophisticated. Evening brings the most complex challenge dinner service. 17 cats who know that interesting things happen in the kitchen versus kitchen staff who believe cats and food preparation are incompatible concepts. You've developed a system of strategic distraction that would impress military tacticians. While the cook's attention is focused on sauce preparation, you quietly position Duchess near the grain stores where her presence prevents any rodent from considering an evening raid. Professor Whiskers takes up position near the cheese, ostensibly napping but actually maintaining surveillance. The younger cats receive assignments to patrol the outer quarters, preventing any ambitious mice from even approaching the kitchen. The humans remain largely unaware of this coordinated effort, which is exactly how you prefer it. Effective pest management is like good diplomacy, most successful when nobody notices it's happening. Your own dinner consists of whatever the kitchen staff remembers to save for you, supplemented by bread and cheese acquired through your own diplomatic efforts. You eat sitting on a stool in the corner while conducting the evening debriefing with whichever cats are available. Duchess reports through a complex system of meows, purrs, and meaningful glances that the grain stores remain secure. Professor Whiskers indicates, with the satisfaction of someone who takes professional pride in his work, that the wine cellar has been thoroughly inspected and found satisfactory. Lady Midnight conveys, with typical feline brevity, that the upper floors continue to meet her high standards. Sir Edgar contributes observations about the day's activities that you interpret as generally positive, though ravens have a way of making even compliments sound vaguely ominous. As night falls, you conduct the evening security deployment. Cats are naturally nocturnal, which makes them perfect for the night shift when most pest problems actually occur. Your job is to ensure optimal coverage without creating territorial disputes that might distract from actual pest control. You've learned to think like a mouse, identifying the routes they'd most likely use to access food stores, the hiding places they'd prefer, the times when human activity is minimal enough to make raiding seem attractive. Then you position cats accordingly, creating an invisible network of security that operates while the castle sleeps. This requires intimate knowledge of each cat's hunting style, territory preferences, and compatibility with colleagues. Duchess prefers solo operations with clearly defined boundaries. Professor Whiskers works well with younger cats who can benefit from his mentorship. Lady Midnight operates best with minimal supervision and maximum independence. The younger cats rotate through different assignments as part of their ongoing education in professional pest management. Tonight, Button is paired with an experienced calico named Commander Fluff for advanced training in kitchen perimeter security. You make your final rounds as the castle settles into night, checking that each cat is positioned optimally and seems content with their assignment. This involves a significant amount of crawling through spaces designed for creatures smaller than humans. But you've developed the flexibility that comes from months of adapting to feline-friendly architecture. Your last stop is always the tower room where Sir Edgar maintains his night roost. He provides what you've learned to interpret as a security briefing, though his information often includes details about weather patterns, interesting cloud formations, and his personal opinions about the moral character of various castle residents. Finally, you return to your own quarters where your bed awaits, or rather, whatever portion of it the cats have determined you're allowed to use tonight. This varies depending on factors that include temperature, humidity, territorial adjustments, and what you suspect might be feline mood cycles linked to lunar phases. You settle into the space they've allocated, surrounded by the gentle purring of cats who have accepted you as a useful member of their organization. Duchess claims the pillow space immediately above your head. Professor Whiskers arranges himself across your feet like a living blanket. Several smaller cats distribute themselves according to principles of heat distribution and personal preference. This is how you fall asleep every night, not alone, but as part of a community that measures success not in coins or titles, but in the absence of unwanted rodents and the presence of mutual respect between species. You dream sometimes of castles overrun with mice, of grain stores destroyed and wine casks contaminated. of nobles discovering evidence of pest problems that would reflect poorly on castle management. Then you wake to find Duchess already beginning her morning patrol, Professor Whiskers stretching in preparation for another day of professional diligence, and Sir Edgar adjusting his feathers with the satisfaction of someone whose night watch has been successful. Your work may not appear in any official castle records, and your colleagues may never receive the recognition they deserve. But you know something that the human administrators don't. The most important victories are very often the quietest ones. The problems that never develop. The crises that are prevented rather than solved. In the morning, nobles will wake to clean chambers. Cooks will find secure food stores. And castle life will continue with the smooth efficiency that comes from problems they never knew they might have had. And you will wake to 17 pairs of eyes that trust you to coordinate their efforts, to understand their needs, and to ensure that their considerable talents are deployed where they can do the most good. It's a good life, measured in purrs instead of praise, in the satisfaction of work well done by colleagues who ask only for respect, regular meals, and the occasional scratch behind the ears. Some partnerships don't require words. Some of the best ones never do. As the cat coordinator settles into sleep surrounded by his purring colleagues, their soft breathing creating a symphony of contentment. The castle's relationship with the natural world extends beyond clever hunters and diplomatic ravens, beyond the stone walls, in spaces where earth meets sky, and seasons mark time more honestly than any bell. Someone tends to the growing things that will heal hurts, flavor meals, and bring the gift of green life into gray stone spaces. The herbs are stirring in their careful rows, touched by the first whisper of dawn wind. They know gentle hands are coming, hands that understand the patient language of root and leaf, seed and harvest. The garden waits, eternal and patient, for its guardian to wake, the herb garden keeper. You wake not to bells or voices, but to the gentle insistence of light filtering through the shutters of your Smino cottage beside the castle's herb garden. This is your privilege and your responsibility to live so close to growing things that you're the first to know when frost threatens, when rain comes, when the delicate balance between nurture and neglect tips in either direction. Your cottage smells like dried lavender and hanging bundles of thyme, like garlic braids and the mysterious earth scent of roots stored properly in darkness. Every beam holds something useful. Chamomile flowers for sleep, willow bark for pain, mint for digestion, rosemary for remembering. You've created a pharmacy that grows itself, a medicine chest that breathes and changes with the seasons. You dress in clothes that have made their peace with dirt. Your apron has pockets specifically designed for seeds, small tools, and the occasional interesting beetle that needs relocating. Your hands are permanently stained green under the nails, decorated with the honorable scars of someone who works with thorns and doesn't always win the negotiations. Your hair is kept in a simple braid that stays out of your way while you work, often decorated with whatever you've been harvesting: a sprig of rosemary, a few lavender stems, once an entire small bird who decided your head was an excellent nesting consultation site. The garden greets you with the particular silence of growing things, not empty quiet, but the full, rich quiet of photosynthesis and root growth in the million tiny conversations between soil and seed that humans can almost hear if they know how to listen. You begin each day with what you call the morning conversation, a walk through the garden paths that tells you everything you need to know about how your green colleagues spent the night. The basil looks content but thirsty. The sage displays its usual dignified self-sufficiency. The mint has clearly been having ambitious thoughts about territorial expansion that will require diplomatic intervention. Your garden is organized according to principles that would puzzle a military strategist, but make perfect sense to anyone who understands that plants have personalities, preferences, and complex social relationships. The healing herbs grow closest to the cottage, where you can monitor them most carefully. The culinary plants occupy the sunny central beds, where their aromatic conversations can inspire each other. The more temperamental medicinal plants live in carefully controlled conditions that accommodate their particular demands. You've learned that gardening is really a form of multilingual diplomacy, Each plant speaks its own language of leaf droop and color change, of eager growth or sullen resistance. Your job is to become fluent enough in each dialect to provide what's needed before the need becomes a crisis. The morning harvest begins with the delicate work of gathering what's ready without disturbing what's still growing. This requires the kind of patience that most humans have forgotten. The ability to see potential in a tight bud, to know exactly when a leaf has achieved its perfect balance of flavor and potency. You carry a shallow wicker basket that's become soft with age and use, moving through the garden with the careful steps of someone who knows that haste can damage more than plants. Each herb has its optimal harvesting time, early morning for some, after the dew has dried for others, never during the heat of midday for the most delicate varieties. Today you gather chamomile flowers for the castle's frequent requests for sleep aids. Their tiny white petals perfect as fresh snow. You collect sage leaves for the kitchen's use in preserving meat and for the physician's respiratory treatments. A handful of mint finds its way into your basket, along with parsley that will brighten tonight's soup and thyme that will transform ordinary bread into something memorable. Your relationship with the castle kitchen is one of mutual respect built over seasons of collaboration. The cook understands that fresh herbs can elevate simple ingredients into memorable meals, while you appreciate having a reliable market for your harvest that also ensures the castle's food is both flavorful and medicinally beneficial. You dry herbs in your cottage according to methods passed down through generations of women who understood that preserving the green world for winter was a form of capturing summer's promises. Bundles hang from rafters in carefully calculated arrangements that ensure proper air circulation. Flowers spread on screens to dry slowly in controlled light. Roots clean and store in the root cellar where consistent temperature and humidity keep them potent until needed. Your knowledge extends beyond simple cultivation to the complex art of preparation and application. You know which herbs work best fresh, which gain potency when dried, which should never be combined, and which create unexpected synergies when used together. This wisdom comes from years of careful observation, meticulous record keeping, and the occasional spectacular failure that taught important lessons about plant chemistry. Mid-morning brings visitors' kitchen staff requesting specific herbs for today's menu. The castle physician consulting about medicinal preparations. Occasionally, nobles seeking remedies for ailments they'd rather not discuss with the official medical authorities. You become skilled at reading between the lines of these requests, providing appropriate herbs along with discreet advice about proper usage. Your garden serves as an unofficial consultation clinic where people can seek help for problems both physical and spiritual. You've learned that many ailments improve as much from the act of being listened to as from any herbal remedy, so you've developed the healer's art of therapeutic conversation. A kitchen maid arrives seeking something for her mother's persistent cough. You provide coltsfoot leaves along with instructions for preparation, but you also spend time asking about the cough's characteristics, duration, and associated symptoms. Sometimes the herb is secondary to the human connection that comes from someone paying attention to suffering that others have ignored. The afternoon is devoted to garden maintenance, the endless, satisfying work of weeding, watering, and protecting growing things from threats both obvious and subtle. You've developed an intimate relationship with every square foot of soil, knowing which areas drain too quickly, which hold water too long, which warm first in spring and stay productive latest into fall. Weeding becomes a form of meditation, the repetitive motion of removing unwanted growth while preserving desired plants. You've learned to distinguish between weeds that are simply misplaced dandelions that would be perfectly welcome in the wild herbs section and true invaders that threaten the garden's carefully maintained balance. Your tool collection reflects years of discovering what works best for each specific task. Hand-forged implements that fit your grip perfectly. Inherited from the previous garden keeper who understood that good tools are partners rather than possessions. You maintain them with the care of someone who knows that a sharp, clean tool prevents damage to both plants and garden. Weather watching becomes second nature when your livelihood depends on understanding nature's moods. You read clouds like other people read books, interpreting the messages written in wind direction, humidity, and the subtle color changes that predict storms. frost, or drought. Your garden's success depends on staying one step ahead of weather's surprises. Evening brings the quiet satisfaction of reviewing the day's progress. New seedlings showing their first true leaves. Established plants responding well to recent care. The season's rhythm moving forward with the reliability that comes from understanding and working with natural cycles rather than fighting them. You prepare your own dinner largely from the garden's bounty, bread enhanced with fresh herbs, soup rich with parsley and thyme, salad greens that were growing in the ground an hour ago. This isn't poverty, it's the luxury of eating food that tastes like the earth it grew in, flavored with sunshine and rain, and the particular satisfaction that comes from nurturing things from seed to harvest. Your cottage in the evening becomes a place of quiet industry. You process the day's harvest, preparing remedies that will be needed throughout the week. Tinctures steeping in clean spirits, oils infusing with healing herbs, salves and balms forming through careful combination of ingredients whose properties complement each other. This work requires the precision of an apothecary combined with the intuition of someone who understands that healing is as much art as science. You've learned to trust your senses, the color that indicates proper extraction, the scent that signals readiness, the texture that confirms successful preparation. As night settles over the garden, you make a final round to ensure everything is secure for the dark hours. This isn't just practical care. It's a form of communion with growing things that connects you to the ancient partnership between humans and plants. You whisper encouragement to struggling seedlings, acknowledge the sturdy resilience of established herbs, and share gratitude with the garden that provides so generously for human needs. Your sleep is filled with green dreams, visions of gardens that span seasons, of hands dirty with honest soil, of the endless cycle of planting and tending and harvesting that connects you to every gardener who has ever coaxed life from earth. Sometimes you dream of walking through herb gardens that stretch beyond horizons, where every healing plant grows in perfect abundance and the air itself carries the scent of wellness. You wake feeling rested in the way that comes from work aligned with natural rhythms, from days spent in partnership with growing things, from the deep satisfaction of providing healing and nourishment through the ancient art of cultivation. Your garden changes with the seasons in ways that mark time more meaningfully than any calendar. Spring brings the excitement of new growth, the daily miracle of seeds responding to warmth and moisture with explosive green energy. Summer offers abundance, the full expression of months of careful nurturing, the harvest that will sustain the castle through darker months. Fall carries the bittersweet satisfaction of gathering the year's final gifts while preparing for winter's rest. You collect seeds for next year's garden, dry the last herbs, and settle the garden into its dormant phase with mulch and protection that will shelter roots through the cold months. Winter becomes a time for planning, for studying, for preparing. You pore over notes from the growing season, planning improvements and experiments for the coming year. You maintain your cottage fire seat, providing dried herbs and prepared remedies, while fresh growth waits for spring's return. But even in winter's depth, something grows. Sprouts on windowsills, herbs that thrive in cool weather. The green promise that life continues even when it appears to sleep. Your work never truly stops because healing never stops being needed. And the partnership between human and plant transcends seasonal limitations. You found something that many people spend lifetimes seeking, work that aligns with natural rhythms, that provides genuine benefit to others, that connects you daily to the fundamental processes that sustain life itself. Your hands may be stained with soil, your back may ache from bending over growing things, but your spirit carries the particular contentment that comes from tending life in its most essential form. Tonight, as you settle into sleep surrounded by the sense of your life's work, you listen to the quiet breathing of the garden outside your window. Tomorrow will bring new growth, new challenges, new opportunities to participate in the ancient conversation between earth and sky, seed and harvest, human need and plant generosity. Some conversations are older than castles, older than kingdoms. Tonight, you're fluent in one of the most essential of them all. As the herb garden keeper dreams of green abundance, her cottage filled with the gentle scents of healing plants, The castle's rhythm shifts once more toward its quietest hours, while gardens rest in darkness and herbs release their fragrances into the night air. Someone else begins their work in the hushed corridors where shadows hold secrets and silence carries its own wisdom. This is the hour when the castle belongs to those who move without sound, who see by lantern light, who know that the deepest care often happens when everyone else sleeps. The stone walls hold their breath, waiting for gentle footsteps that bring comfort to the darkness. A wick catches flame. The night watch begins. The night watch woman. You light your lantern as the last of the evening's activity fades into memory, the wick catching with a soft whisper that seems unusually loud in the gathering quiet. The tallow candle inside casts a warm, steady glow that will be your companion through the hours when the castle belongs more to shadows than to the people who fill it during the day. Your lantern is your most trusted tool, not just for the light it provides, but for the comfort it offers in spaces that can feel vast and lonely in the deep hours of night. You've learned to trim the wick perfectly, to carry extra candles in a leather pouch that doesn't rattle, to shield the flame from drafts without blocking the light. You need to do your work. You dress for silence and stealth, soft leather shoes that make no sound on stone floors, a woolen dress in dark colors that won't catch attention, a cloak that's warm enough for drafty corridors, but not so heavy that it hampers movement. Every piece of your clothing has been chosen for its ability to help you move through the castle like a helpful ghost. Your key ring hangs from your belt on a cloth loop that prevents the metal from chiming against itself. Each key has been carefully identified and arranged in the order you'll need them during your rounds. You know by touch which key opens the linen stores, which unlocks the chapel side door, which provides access to the upper corridors where the most delicate situations might require your attention. The castle at night reveals itself differently than during the day. Sounds carry further and seem more significant. The creak of settling timber, the whisper of wind through arrow slits, the distant murmur of someone talking in their sleep, all become part of a symphony that tells you about the castle's nocturnal personality. You begin your first round as twilight deepens into true darkness, moving through familiar paths with the confidence of someone who could navigate these corridors blind. Your route has been carefully planned to cover the areas where problems are most likely to develop, places where fires might start, where illness might worsen, where simple human needs might arise in the hours when most help is unavailable. The nursery receives your first attention, where two young noble children sleep under embroidered quilts that cost more than most people see in a lifetime. You don't know their names, that's not your place, but you know their breathing patterns, their tendency to kick off blankets, which one sometimes has nightmares that respond to gentle humming. Tonight they sleep peacefully, small forms barely disturbing the expensive bedding. You straighten a blanket that's shifted during sleep, ensuring that warmth will continue through the night, and move on without sound. The great hall follows, vast and empty now except for the tapestries that seem to move in your lantern light. Grand scenes of battles and hunts and courtly ceremonies watch you pass with the glassy eyes of embroidered heroes. You've grown comfortable with their silent observation, understanding that you're as much a guardian of their stories as of the people who sleep elsewhere in the castle. Your footsteps echo differently in the large space, and you adjust your pace to minimize even that small sound. Someone might be sleeping in an alcove, or a servant might be resting in a corner after a long day. Your job is to provide security without disturbing the rest that everyone deserves. The chapel draws you next, where votive candles sometimes burn through the night. You're not particularly religious, but you respect the space and the comfort it provides to others. Tonight you find a candle guttering dangerously close to some cloth hangings. You snuff it carefully and make a mental note to mention the fire hazard to the chaplain in the morning. Your work involves constant small preventions, dangers noticed and eliminated before they become crises, problems solved before they're discovered, comfort provided before it's requested. This requires a particular kind of attention, the ability to see what might happen rather than just what is happening. The wine cellar earns a brief inspection, not because you expect problems, but because temperature changes or unexpected moisture could damage stores that represent significant investment. You note that everything appears secure, though you suspect Lady Midnight has been conducting her own inspection based on the paw prints in a light coating of dust. Midway through your first round, you encounter one of the castle's human residents in distress. A kitchen maid sits on the stairs, crying quietly with the particular desperation of someone trying not to wake anyone. Her mother has taken a turn for the worse, fever rising, breathing becoming labored. You settle beside her without ceremony, setting your lantern to provide gentle light without drawing unwanted attention. You listen as she describes symptoms that sound like they could respond to the right herb combination, if administered properly and soon. From your bag, you produce a small cloth packet containing feverfew and willow bark, along with careful instructions for preparation. But more importantly, you provide what the herbs alone cannot: the comfort of being heard, of having someone take her worry seriously, of not facing the night's fears alone. You accompany her to the kitchen, help her prepare the herbal tea according to the proper proportions, and offer to check on the situation during your later rounds. Sometimes the medicine matters less than the message that someone cares enough to help. Your second round takes you to the upper floors where nobles sleep in chambers appointed with luxuries that would astonish the servants who maintain them. Your presence here requires even greater discretion. These are people who value their privacy and have the power to make difficulties for anyone who disturbs it inappropriately. But even nobles have problems that arise in the night. You discover an open window in the East Tower that should have been secured after the evening meal. Weather threatens, and an open window could mean water damage to tapestries and furnishings that would be both expensive and irreplaceable. You close the window carefully, ensuring the latch is properly secured, and make a note to mention the issue to the appropriate servant in the morning. Your job is to prevent problems, not to assign blame for their near occurrence. The solar corridor presents its own challenges. Here sleep the castle's most important guests, people whose comfort directly affects the Lord's reputation and political relationships. You move with extra care, your lantern shielded to provide just enough light for safety without risking unwanted attention. A soft sound from one of the chambers causes you to pause, not distress, but the murmur of conversation that suggests someone is awake and possibly in need of assistance. You wait, listening carefully to determine whether intervention would be helpful or intrusive. The voices fade back into sleep, and you continue your rounds. Your route includes the service areas where the castle's essential work happens, even during night hours. The kitchen retains warmth from the day's cooking, and you check that fires are properly banked, that nothing has been left in dangerous proximity to heat sources, that the morning's work can begin safely. You find a pot of soup still warming gently over coals, someone's attempt to have hot food available for early workers. You taste it carefully, both to ensure it hasn't spoiled and because you haven't eaten since evening. Find it good and ensure it will remain safely warm without risk of burning. The laundry area requires attention because damp cloth near heat sources can be hazardous, and because morning workers will need clean linens to begin their day. You find everything properly arranged, though you notice that someone has left a noble's cloak too close to the drying fire and has begun to singe at the hem. You remove the cloak, examine the damage, and realize it can be repaired if attended to promptly. From your bag, you produce needle and thread, and spend the next hour carefully mending the burn damage with stitches small enough to be nearly invisible. By morning, the cloak will appear undamaged, and no one will know how close the castle came to a minor crisis. Your third round occurs in the deepest part of night, when even the most wakeful residents have usually settled into sleep. This is when the castle feels most like itself, ancient stones breathing slowly, timber settling into comfortable positions, the accumulated weight of centuries creating an atmosphere of profound peace. You move more slowly during this round, partly because exhaustion is beginning to affect your own energy, but mostly because this is when you can truly attend to the castle's needs rather than its human occupants. You note a loose stone in the wall that might benefit from attention, a draft that suggests a shutter needs adjustment, the subtle signs of wear that indicate where maintenance will soon be needed. The armory receives special attention during this round. Weapons and armor represent both significant value and potential danger if they fall into wrong hands. You check that all entries are properly secured, that nothing appears to have been disturbed, that the morning guard will find everything exactly as it should be. Your own needs occasionally require attention during these long nights. You carry food for yourself, bread, cheese, dried fruit that provides energy without requiring preparation. You eat in whatever location offers a moment of rest, always ready to resume your duties if the castle requires your attention. Sometimes you encounter other night workers, guards making their own rounds, servants attending to responsibilities that must be handled during quiet hours. Occasionally, nobles who are unable to sleep and have chosen to wander the corridors. Your interactions with them are brief, professional, and designed to provide whatever assistance might be helpful without creating obligation or expectation. A guard captain nods approvingly as you pass, recognizing the value of having someone attend to civilian concerns while his men focus on security. A noble lady, suffering from insomnia, accepts your suggestion of chamomile tea and the location of comfortable seating where she can wait for drowsiness to return. Your final round begins as the first hint of dawn touches the eastern windows. This is when you complete any tasks that have accumulated during the night. Ensure that the castle is properly prepared for the day shift to assume responsibility, and compile mental notes about items that will require attention during daylight hours. You make final checks of the nursery, where the children sleep deeply in the profound rest of youth. The Great Hall stands ready for the day's activities. The chapel is prepared for morning prayers. Every area you've monitored through the night is secure, comfortable, and ready for the castle's daily resurrection. Your cottage, when you finally reach it, feels like the reward for a night's work well done. It's small but private, warm but not luxurious, equipped with everything you need to rest and prepare for another night's duties. You remove your cloak and shoes, trim and extinguish your lantern, and settle into a bed that feels especially comfortable after hours of walking stone corridors. You fall asleep to the sound of the castle waking distant voices, footsteps, the beginning of another day's activities. You've successfully guided the castle through another night, preventing problems, providing comfort, ensuring that morning arrives to find everything as it should be. Your dreams are filled with corridors of gentle light, with the satisfaction of work done without recognition, with the particular peace that comes from knowing you've made a difference in ways that may never be noticed, but are nevertheless essential. Tomorrow night, you'll light your lantern again and resume the quiet guardianship that keeps the castle safe while it sleeps. Some work is most important precisely because it's invisible, and some care is most valuable when it's provided without expectation of thanks. In a world that often measures worth by visibility and acclaim, you've found profound satisfaction in being the person who ensures that the most vulnerable hours pass safely for everyone who depends on your attention. Sleep comes easily when you know you have earned it. As the night watchwoman settles into her well-earned rest, her lantern safely extinguished after another night of quiet guardianship, the castle begins its daily transformation from sleeping fortress to bustling community. But before the chaos of full activity begins, before nobles issue their commands and servants rush to fulfill them, there exists a brief, precious hour when organization can triumph over confusion. In a small chamber overlooking the courtyard, someone rises early not from obligation but from the satisfaction of bringing order to complexity, of solving problems before they become crises, of building bridges between the world of commands and the world of those who must fulfill them. The ledgers are waiting, the day's challenges are already forming, and someone must make sense of it all. The young steward's assistant. You wake before dawn because your mind has already begun organizing the day ahead, sorting through yesterday's incomplete tasks and anticipating today's inevitable surprises. This isn't anxiety, it's the particular alertness that comes from work you genuinely understand, challenges that engage rather than overwhelm, problems that yield careful thought and persistent effort. Your chamber is small but well-appointed, reflecting your position as someone trusted with responsibility, but not yet elevated to true authority. A writing desk holds ledgers, ink, and parchment arranged with the precision of someone who knows that organization prevents crises. A bookshelf contains reference materials, records of past precedents, notes on noble preferences, carefully maintain correspondence that might prove useful when diplomatic situations arise. You dress in clothes that announce competence without claiming importance. Clean, well-fitted, made of good cloth but not luxurious materials. Your appearance must inspire confidence in your abilities while avoiding any suggestion that you consider yourself above your station. This balance requires careful attention, but you've learned to navigate the complex semiotics of castle clothing with the skill of a diplomat. Your writing materials travel with you in a leather satchel that's become as essential as your own hands. Ink that doesn't freeze in winter or thicken in summer heat. Parchment of various qualities for different types of correspondence. Sealing wax and the assistant seal that allows you to authenticate documents on behalf of the steward. A selection of quills that you've learned to cut and maintain yourself. Because illegible writing creates more problems than it solves. The steward's chamber serves as your morning destination, where you'll receive the day's assignments and contribute to the strategic planning that keeps the castle functioning smoothly. The steward himself is a thin, precise man who speaks in lists and thinks in contingencies. He smells faintly of lavender and parchment, maintains spotless robes through some form of supernatural discipline, and has the remarkable ability to anticipate problems that haven't yet occurred to anyone else. 2 bolts of wool, the fine weave. He begins without preamble, because greeting would waste time that could be devoted to essential information. 4 barrels of lamp oil, delivered before the feast preparations begin. 1 visiting friar with dietary requirements that challenge both theology and practical cooking. The Lord's hunting dog has developed opinions about the new stable boy that require diplomatic resolution. You write everything down, not because your memory is inadequate, but because written records prevent the misunderstandings that arise when complex information travels through multiple people. Your handwriting has evolved to be both rapid and legible, a skill that proves invaluable when important information must be recorded quickly and accurately. Your morning involves translating the steward's strategic concerns into practical actions that various castle departments can understand and implement. This requires fluency in multiple forms of communication, the formal language appropriate for correspondence with other noble houses, the practical terminology that kitchen staff use to discuss meal preparation, the diplomatic phrasing necessary when requests might be interpreted as criticism. The wool procurement requires negotiating with merchants who understand their product's value and are skilled at detecting when buyers are operating under pressure. You approach these negotiations with the patience of someone who knows that appearing desperate increases prices while maintaining calm confidence often leads to favorable terms. Your conversation with the cloth merchant becomes a delicate dance of information exchange. You need quality wool delivered promptly, but you can't reveal the urgency that might inflate costs. The merchant wants to maximize profit while maintaining good relationships for future business. You find common ground through honest assessment of mutual needs and fair consideration of practical constraints. The lamp oil presents logistical challenges that require coordination between suppliers, transportation, and storage. Oil is heavy, valuable, and potentially dangerous if handled improperly. Your job involves ensuring adequate supply while managing costs and preventing the storage problems that could create fire hazards or contamination. The visiting friar's dietary requirements prove more complex than initially apparent. His theological objections to certain foods intersect with practical limitations of castle cooking in ways that require creative problem solving. You spend time consulting both religious texts and kitchen staff to develop meal plans that satisfy spiritual requirements without creating impossible demands on food preparation. Midday brings the challenge of managing competing priorities with limited resources. The Lord requires detailed accounting of recent expenditures. The lady has decided that guest chambers need immediate redecoration, and the captain of guards reports equipment needs that affect castle security. Each request is legitimate and important. Your job is to coordinate responses that address all concerns without creating impossible conflicts. You've learned to think like a chess player, anticipating how each decision affects future options, how solving one problem might create others, how timing can transform difficult requests into manageable challenges. This requires maintaining detailed mental maps of ongoing projects, available resources, and the complex web of relationships that determines what's possible within the castle's social and economic structure. The Lord's accounting request involves compiling financial records that demonstrate both fiscal responsibility and appropriate expenditure for someone of his station. This requires presenting information that shows careful management without suggesting any limitation of resources that might reflect poorly on his status. You organize numbers to tell the story of prosperity managed wisely rather than wealth constrained by necessity. The lady's redecoration plans require diplomatic translation between her aesthetic vision and practical constraints of budget, availability, and time. You listen carefully to her descriptions of desired outcomes, then research options that might achieve similar effects through approaches that align with available resources. This involves understanding both interior design principles and the psychology of presenting alternatives in ways that feel like choices rather than limitations. The guard's equipment needs to intersect with security requirements that affect everyone's safety. You review their requests against inventory records, budget allocations, and strategic priorities that balance immediate needs against long-term planning. Some requirements are urgent and non-negotiable. Others can be phased to spread costs and coordinate with other major purchases. Afternoon brings the satisfaction of solving problems through careful coordination and creative thinking. You draft correspondence that maintains diplomatic relationships while securing favorable terms for necessary purchases. You develop implementation schedules that address multiple priorities without overwhelming any single department. You identify solutions that meet stated requirements while often exceeding expectations through careful attention to unstated needs. Your position allows you to observe the castle's operation from a unique perspective, close enough to daily details to understand practical constraints, but distant enough from specific departments to see patterns and connections that might escape more specialized workers. This overview enables you to identify opportunities for improvement that benefit everyone involved. The hunting dog situation requires particularly delicate handling, involving negotiations between the Lord's attachment to his pet, the stable boy's legitimate concerns about workplace safety, and the practical reality that hunting dogs and horses must coexist peacefully. You arrange a consultation with the castle's animal handlers to develop training approaches that address behavioral issues while respecting the relationships that make both hunting and stable work effective. Evening brings the quiet satisfaction of reviewing completed tasks and preparing for tomorrow's challenges. You update ledgers with the day's transactions, file correspondence for future reference, and compile notes about ongoing projects that will require continued attention. This record-keeping serves both immediate practical needs and long-term institutional memory that prevents the same problems from recurring unnecessarily. Your dinner often consists of food consumed while working, bread that can be eaten with one hand while writing with the other, cheese that doesn't require elaborate preparation, fruit that provides energy without creating distractions. You've learned to appreciate meals that fuel work rather than interrupting it, though you occasionally join other castle staff for the social connection that prevents administrative work from becoming entirely solitary. The steward's evening consultation provides opportunities to discuss the day's accomplishments and identify priorities for tomorrow's attention. These conversations blend immediate problem solving with longer-term strategic thinking, helping you develop the broader perspective that transforms task completion into genuine understanding of how administrative work supports the castle's larger purposes. Your own evening activities include personal study that enhances your professional capabilities, reading correspondence from other noble houses to understand diplomatic conventions, reviewing financial records to identify patterns that might inform future planning, practicing penmanship to ensure that important documents reflect appropriate dignity and attention to detail. You maintain personal correspondence with family members who understand your work's importance, even if they don't fully comprehend its complexities. Your letters home describe accomplishments and challenges in ways that convey satisfaction without boasting, responsibility without complaining, advancement without losing connection to your origins. Your chamber at night becomes a sanctuary where you can process the day's experiences and prepare mentally for tomorrow's responsibilities. You arrange tomorrow's materials, review notes about scheduled meetings and deadlines, and allow your mind to rest in the satisfaction of work well done and challenges successfully navigated. Sleep comes easily when your conscience is clear and your responsibilities are current. You dream sometimes of perfectly organized castles where every request is anticipated, every need is met promptly, and every problem is solved before it develops. These dreams aren't fantasies of escape, but visions of professional aspiration, images of what administrative excellence might achieve when practiced with sufficient skill and dedication. Your work may not appear in songs or stories, but you know something that many people never discover: the deep satisfaction that comes from building bridges between different worlds, from translating between different languages of need and capability, from creating order that enables others to focus on their own essential contributions without being overwhelmed by coordination challenges they're not equipped to handle. Morning will bring new challenges, unexpected complications, opportunities to demonstrate that careful thinking and persistent effort can solve problems that initially appear impossible. You'll wake refreshed and eager to engage with whatever the day presents, confident in your growing abilities and grateful for work that engages your best capabilities in service of something larger than yourself. Some victories are measured in smooth coordination rather than dramatic achievement, in problems prevented rather than crises resolved, in the quiet satisfaction of helping a complex community function more effectively than anyone thought possible. Tomorrow, you'll continue building that kind of victory, one careful decision at a time. And so the castle sleeps, held together not by stone and mortar alone, but by the thousand small devotions that weave through each day like golden thread through tapestry. The fire tended before dawn by hands that know the temperament of flame. The horses gentled with patient words that speak a language older than kingdoms. The herbs growing in careful rows, tended by someone who understands that healing begins in soil and sunlight, in the ancient partnership between human need and plant generosity. These weren't the people whose names were carved in stone or sung in ballads that echo through great halls, but they were the ones who understood something that often escapes those who live in brighter light: that true strength doesn't always announce itself with fanfare, that the most important victories happen in quiet moments when no one is watching, and that dignity doesn't require an audience to validate its worth. Tonight, as you settle into your own rest, remember their rhythm, because it's a rhythm that transcends centuries and speaks to something essential in the human spirit. Work with purpose, even when the purpose seems small. Rest when it's earned, because rest without effort lacks the sweetness that makes sleep truly restorative. Find joy in simple tasks, because complexity often obscures the satisfaction that comes from things done well and completely. Trust grows slowly but lasts longest between the stable boy and his horses, between the herb keeper and her garden, between the night watchwoman and the castle that depends on her vigilant care. These partnerships remind us that the most meaningful connections often exist between different species, different worlds, different ways of being that complement each other through mutual respect rather than similarity. The castle dreams now, its stones breathing slowly in the rhythm that ancient buildings develop when they've sheltered enough lives to understand something about the weight of time and the lightness of genuine care. Somewhere in its depths, a cat patrols silently, maintaining the balance between human comfort and natural order. Somewhere in its heights, stars shine through arrow slits onto empty corridors that tomorrow will fill again with the purposeful movement of people who know their work matters. The scullery maid sleeps beside embers that will warm tomorrow's water. The spit boy dreams of perfectly turned roasts, while his hands finally rest from their patient rotation. The stable boy breathes in harmony with horses who trust him enough to sleep peacefully under his watch. The cat coordinator dreams in a language of purrs and whispered conversations with creatures who judge character by kindness rather than status. In her cottage, the herb keeper rests surrounded by the gentle scents of healing plants, her dreams filled with visions of green abundance that will comfort and cure throughout the coming seasons. The night watchwoman has earned her sleep through hours of silent guardianship, Her lantern safely extinguished after another night of keeping the vulnerable safe from dangers they never knew threatened them. And the young steward's assistant sleeps with the satisfaction of someone who has spent the day building bridges between different worlds, solving problems through careful thought and patient effort, creating order that allows others to focus on their own essential contributions without being overwhelmed by complications beyond their expertise. These 7 lives remind us that glory isn't always loud, that strength doesn't always shine in armor, and that the most profound stories are often written not in gold ink on parchment, but in the daily choices to show up, to care, to persist in the face of work that may never be celebrated but is nonetheless essential. Sleep comes easily when the work is done and done well, when conscience is clear and effort has been honest, when the day's small victories accumulate into the larger victory of a life lived with purpose and dignity, regardless of circumstances. Rest well, knowing that somewhere, someone is still keeping watch, still tending the fire, still caring for the creatures great and small that depend on gentle hands and steady hearts. The rhythm continues, as it always has, as it always will, the quiet pulse of people who understand that civilization rests not on the shoulders of the famous, but on the patient persistence of those who choose, day after day, to make life a little safer, a little warmer, a little more bearable for everyone who shares their world. The fire never truly dies, it just waits, glowing quietly in banked embers, for tomorrow's hands to coax it back to life. The horses dream of meadows and gentle voices. The herbs rest in their rows, gathering strength for another season of healing. The cats maintain their ancient vigil, and the stars continue their eternal watch over a world where the most important work often happens in the shadows. Good night, sleep well, the castle dreams, and so should you, in the morning. If you listen carefully, you might hear the echo of their rhythm in your own day, the satisfaction that comes from small tasks completed with care, the dignity that grows from honest work honestly done, the peace that settles over those who understand that being useful is often more valuable than being celebrated. Until then, rest in the knowledge that their story continues, as it has for centuries, as it will for centuries more, the endless, essential story of people who choose to tend rather than take, to build rather than tear down, to care for the world they have been given with whatever tools they have at hand. The castle sleeps, dream well.